That's me. Hi. How's it going?
So the workshop starts in a bit.
Yeah.
Goes on for an hour.
The first one, yeah.
Do you think like the research will be available later on online? I just have something else that came up, so I might need to leave for that.
Yeah, no worries. It should be available online afterwards. You can find it on the YouTube channel, and then it should be posted to like Portal within the next day or so. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
So all of them are similar, right? They'll be uploaded to
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Have a nice day.
You too.
All right. That's not quite what I would like. Sorry, just troubleshooting a little bit here, and we should be ready to get started in just a second. All right.
I will just, do I need to just wait for folks to come on in for a couple minutes?
Yeah, I guess we'll give them about 5 minutes, and then we do have some folks in person here, so they will see and hear you, and I'll be able to pass around a microphone for them to ask questions.
Yeah, I tried to time this out so that it's about like 45 to 50 minutes, and then there's 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. That way, if you have like some burning question or something specific that isn't like exactly on the slides, or you want more clarification, there should be enough time at the end for that. And as well, I'm always available by email if people need to reach out, and or if they think of something afterwards and want to have a more in-depth conversation about something.
Wonderful. And do you have your email kind of like towards the end of the presentation?
I have it on the second slide, the kind of about me stuff, but I can make sure that at the end of the presentation I go back to that slide so that people can take it down if they need to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as long as it's somewhere in the presentation, it gets the job done.
And I'm sure like the natHACKS organizers, you all have like Slack and Discord, so if need be, I'm sure you guys can connect someone if they happen to miss the email.
For sure. One way or another, we will get questions to you.
Oh yeah. My November is more relaxed than the rest of the term has been, so.
Well, that's good. That's not very typical for a November.
Oh, my September was insanely packed, so.
That's good.
It's starting to calm down now.
I'm not too sure if we'll have anyone else joining us for today's workshop, so I guess whenever you're ready, feel free to get started.
Sounds good. All right then. I'll just start my timer so I don't run over time and everyone has time for questions at the end. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you had a good Halloween earlier this week, and that you are staying nice and warm on your November evening. I'm Pauline Belogan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Alberta, and I'm just going to give a presentation tonight on an introduction to neurotechnology and just kind of covering a brief overview of what that is all about as you guys prepare for natHACKS. So like I said, I'm a PhD student at the University of Alberta. I'm in the SEO lab, and I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in neuroscience, specifically computational neuroscience. If you need to reach me, my email is there on the screen, pbelogan@ualberta.ca. I'm usually pretty good about answering same day or within a couple of days. All right, so what are we going to talk about tonight? First, what even is neurotechnology? Then a couple of the applications of neurotechnology, some examples of various neurotechnologies, some of the challenges of neurotechnology, and then some examples and ideas for you guys as you go about natHACKS later this month. So first, what is neurotech? Well, broadly, or perhaps if you were to Google it, you would see an interdisciplinary field that requires an in-depth knowledge of the nervous system. You can kind of break this down into a number of different fields, but often it begins with neuroimaging, being able to see what the nervous system is doing somehow, and then either modulating that or using that in an interface, brain-computer or brain-machine interfaces to accomplish some task. So when we look at neuroimaging, this is really about understanding the brain, being able to see its activity, see its structures, see if there's any disactivity or atypical activity that could indicate a disease state or anything like that. You can see attention, you can see different kinds of stimulus. You can even nowadays kind of do a bit of mind reading, where using, especially with like ChatGPT and AI, try and put together pictures or even paragraphs of what people are thinking about using fMRI and other real-time brain imaging. And then when we talk about neuromodulation, we're thinking of altering the brain somehow. So this can be through deep brain stimulator or spinal cord stimulators that can be used to treat chronic pain, Parkinson's disease. Really, there's quite a few different avenues of approach with how we go about stimulating different parts of the nervous system to affect different kinds of disorders and disease states. And then probably the most relevant to you folks will be brain-computer interfaces, which is really using and harnessing the brain. So we have prosthetics, bionic eyes, hearing aids, wheelchairs, can all be hooked up to the brain in some way and have a feedback loop where they're taking in stimulus, sending it to the brain and back and forth, either to regain functionality that might have been lost in the case of hearing loss, vision loss, loss of a limb, or to regain functionality. We see this with ASL devices, often with people who are locked in and aren't able to speak or really move conventionally. And all of these can be really minimally invasive, where there's no surgery or anything required, or it can be incredibly invasive, where something is directly implanted into the brain or the body and used to kind of bridge that gap somehow, either for imaging or modulation or as a brain-computer interface. All right, so what do we really use neurotechnology for? I've mentioned a couple so far, but there's kind of four broad categories that underpin neurotechnology, or the reasons for it at least. We have treatment, research, device control, and augmentation. So for treatment, we have diseases, disorders, and aging. So why do we care about using neurotechnology for treatment? Well, neurological disorders are the second leading cause of death globally. 1 in 8 Canadians here in Canada know or will be affected by Alzheimer's disease, for example. And you have degenerative disorders such as Huntington's or Parkinson's.
Apologies there, it looks like we lost.
Progress is made. We see improvements in leaps and bounds, but there are a number of challenges with specifically brain-computer interfaces that are somewhat unique compared to other fields of technology. But we'll get into that in a bit. So here are some examples of all of the various things that have either been proposed or are in the process of being treated by a brain device. So these include everything from mood disorders like bipolar or depression or anxiety to phantom limb pain or stroke, migraines, multiple sclerosis, addiction, blindness, brain damage. All of these are included as possible therapeutic or medical targets for brain devices. Research is a bit more obvious why we need to keep improving and using neurotechnology. There are quite a few unsolved problems of neuroscience. Some are more attainable than others. They go from everything that is more philosophical, existential type questions, such as, how is it possible that we think about thinking? What makes, humans different from other similar, especially primates, in being sentient and sapient. But even on a more basic level, when we look at diseases and disorders, what causes these neurological and psychiatric illnesses can be a big gray area. The brain is incredibly complex, and it is influenced by itself, by the environment, by our genetics, and it is really a confluence of complex factors, and we really only have the smallest piece of that. A neuroscientist once very famously said, if all there was to know about the brain was a mile, then humanity has progressed about 3 inches. And it can be difficult to create that interface when you're kind of groping around in the dark. Next, we have device control. Technology becomes more advanced and intimately connected to us and our lives when we look at the first computers that were as large as a room or larger. And now most people have a laptop or a desktop computer that they can use in their homes and offices. When we look at phones, where we had telegraph lines and then eventually into landlines, and then going on to the earliest large brick cell phones. And now everyone has, or most people have, a smartphone that they can take with them anywhere. Technology just becomes more entwined with us and our lives. And as these pieces of technology get more and more complicated, being able to navigate them and communicate with them effectively starts to come into question as well. When we look at the medical side of things, we have things like neuroprosthetics, where we can have prosthetics that can take in sensory information like light and hard pressure, hot, cold, smooth, rough, and can output motor information, open, close, up, down, left, right, that sort of thing. And then we have computer input, where people are connecting to computer or other electronic device in a commercial aspect or even industrial applications. We also have wheelchairs, robotic surgeons, smart appliances, drones, lights, all sorts of things that become more and more entwined with us physically and socially, that companies are looking into as brain-computer devices. Finally, we have augmentation. So this is going above and beyond the usual or average human performance or experience. So there's Halo, which is used to optimize or increase sports performance. Neurosity, which is EEG to assist with your focus and concentration. Hum, to expand working memory. Dream, which can help you with sleep reports, not just in the case of any sort of potential medical issue, but to see what you are dreaming or thinking about. Muse, for those of you who practice meditation or mindfulness, that might be something you're interested in looking up. But these 4 categories are kind of broadly why people pursue neurotechnology. Now, when we say neurotechnology, people are probably thinking of some sort of electronic device, which of course is included in neurotechnology. But there are actually quite a few different fields of what can broadly be considered neurotechnology. Everything from neuropharmacology and implanted drug delivery systems to gene therapy, neurosurgery, brain-computer interface devices, neuroprosthetics, and more, that all can be considered part of this field. This is just really an overview of the different fields. You could probably keep listing them as more and more there's a lot of overlap between neuroscience and other fields, even economics. There's neuroeconomics, for example, and brain-related marketing and the sort of brain hacking that people can do as companies try to best advertise their products to people. They want to know, on average, you know, what's going to target people the best, or encourage them to be repeat customers, for instance. But today we are going to focus on brain-computer interface, since I think that's probably the bulk of what most participants in natHACKS are going to be concerned with. So this is a bit of a general pathway for brain-computer interfaces. So we start with signal acquisition from the brain, the spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system. The electrical signal from that is processed, and then a control signal or output is then sent to a device of some kind. And then occasionally that you'll have the, depending on what the purpose of your system is, do you also want feedback to go to the user or some sort of monitoring system to make sure that everything is working as it should be. So for many of you, that will begin with some sort of imaging data from the brain or spinal cord. Broadly, there are two kinds of neuroimaging: electrophysiological imaging. So this includes EEG or EMG, or metabolic imaging. There's a number of different kinds, but probably the one you're going to encounter most frequently is fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging. You can see that the top right here. You have the different heat maps of increased and decreased neural activity. If any of you are in the talk after this one, we'll get into more of the specifics of this. But this all sounds pretty fine and dandy, but obviously there are some limitations. There's some challenges that have yet to be solved or take quite a bit of ingenuity to overcome, as with any type of project. So when we think about the brain, we are talking about millions of neurons and trillions of connections with all sorts of simultaneous activity pertaining to all types of stimuli and signals, both from inside the body, outside the body, stuff about people's conscious thoughts, subconscious processes. But when we look at our ability to record or image the brain, we're really only talking about an upper limit of a few hundred neurons that we can record simultaneously. And this is not just in humans, but across any sort of lab animal that you might see with these kinds of brain-computer interfaces. It's just, there's a bandwidth problem of getting electrodes onto the brain, because when we think about how small each neuron is and how many different connections it could potentially have, we just aren't able to fit enough electrodes on someone's head and record it effectively simultaneously. And similar to the early computer chip problem, until we had an integrated computer chip, it was very, very difficult to have a computer that was smaller than the floor of a building. You might be able to get it down to the size of a room, but you certainly wouldn't expect everyone to have a whole room in their home dedicated to just a computer. And we have that kind of currently as a problem with brain-computer interfaces. Another key problem that you guys will probably be encountering later this month is getting a clean signal from a user. Now, ideally, you will have no electrical noise, your participant won't blink, they won't breathe, they won't have a heartbeat, they won't twitch or yawn or do anything except hold perfectly, completely still, much like a mannequin, which would probably mean that they are not alive. You should probably call 911. So as you can see, we have on the left side here an example of EEG traces from different parts of the brain. So these letter number combinations are different parts of the brain. So the top one is a clean signal. And if you look at the power density over to the right, you can see how there's a spread of different amplitudes across different frequencies in the brain. When we have power line noise, we have this spike here. My presentation has just frozen. Okay. All right. I'll keep talking. Hopefully you guys are still seeing the presentation. My screen's gone black. Yes, so in that second line, you're hopefully seeing an example of power line noise interference with the EEG trace. Depending on where you're running this, you might see a large spike at 50 hertz, but if you are in Europe or Asia, you'll see it at a different location just because of how their power grids are set up. Similar to how if you take electronics over there, you need a plug adapter. The third line, you should see eye movement and eye blinking interfering with the EEG trace. And this really goes to show one of the main issues is that you have a large amount of signal noise overlap between the frequencies of interest and potential sources of noise, such as heartbeat, breathing, people moving their eyes or blinking, that can come and affect your output. And the final bit is, final line is a muscular artifact. So this could be clenching their jaw, their ear twitching. They could even be like, if they're a fidgeter, they could have moved their hand or a finger or maybe a toe. It could be them shifting their neck or shifting their weight. There's a number of different ways a user could have noise in their signal. So we have two problems, which is how do I get the right information out of the brain? And then how do I send the right information into the brain? So that was talking about bandwidth and implementation. We can see that we have issues with, heavy data, limits of resolution, where we have millions of neurons, but we can only stick in hundreds of electrodes that are going to be recording some column of activity potentially all the way down. And people don't like it when you crack their heads open. Even for like a really, really good reason, most people do not like brain surgery of any kind, especially if it is to turn on the light switch or something like that. So you're probably going to be transmitting through bone, and bone is not a good conductor of electricity. So your signal is going to be quite varied depending on what structures you're dealing with. And especially some of the really interesting stuff can be deep inside the brain, far away from the skull, and hard to get access to. Implementation, degradation, you can see if you have an implanted device, which I don't think any of you will have to handle, but most electronics don't like being put into some sort of wet jelly. And you can have all sorts of degradation or erosion, complications like infection, anything that could be a typical risk, and then you put it into the brain that does not have an immune system. Well, it has partially an immune system response, but is unable to have like white blood cells, for instance, to attack infection. You can have quite a large problem. And of course, if you're dealing with an area, if you're trying to treat a disorder or disease and we don't know the cause, well, what part of the brain should you even be looking at? How deep inside is it? What even are you looking for, depending on what kind of neuroimaging you're using? If you're looking at someone with Alzheimer's, what does that look like on fMRI versus an EEG versus a PET scan, for example? Then with people, the brain is creating a gestalt perception of the world. It's taking in all of these different points of data, sight, sound, touch, smell. It's monitoring its position in space, whether it's hot or cold, dry or wet, what parts of it are hot or cold, dry or wet, whether you're uncomfortable, whether you're in pain, and it's piecing all of these things together to create what for most people experience a smooth experience of the world around them. But if you're recording from different parts of the brain, what really are you looking at? What is going to be processed there, and how integrated is that going to be? For those of you who want to do something artistic, maybe for natHACKS, or maybe some of those kind of mind reading type things. If someone is thinking of a cat, well, when is a cat not a cat? How do you put together all of the different parts of what make up a cat? So it has fur, it has 4 limbs, but what if they're thinking of a 3-legged cat, for example? Does it have whiskers? Does it not have whiskers? Does it have spots? Does it have stripes? What color is it? All of these things are different facets of a Gestalt understanding of cat as a category. But if you're trying to specifically come up with a picture, it can start getting pretty tricky. And then ethics. So I mentioned brain hacking, for instance, but there are privacy concerns when it comes to the kinds of information that people can have produced about not just, shopping habits or, those sorts of things. I swear, like Facebook seems to be listening to my conversations, and I'm always getting ads up on Facebook about, oh, hey, I think I need new glasses. And suddenly I'm getting like 50 ads about glasses. But this is like, even from within your own head, if we're dealing with neurotechnology, people need to make sure that those kinds of privacy concerns, and if they're connecting with some sort of monitoring device, how secure is that data? Is it going to be used for anything else? All of those sorts of end user license agreements that we tend to just click through. When it comes to stuff like brain computer interfaces, it can be ethics can be an overriding concern for many people. All right, good. I think I'm still on time, so we can go through some examples and ideas here. So of course, we're going to be talking about brain activity. So your neurons have activity that fluctuates, but we're not reporting from just a single neuron. We're talking about groups. And when group activity is fluctuating, it will fluctuate hopefully in a pattern that is recognizable. You'll probably be using EEG or fMRI by and large. I don't think anyone's going to be using something else. EEG is directly measuring electrical activity from neural ensembles, which are just groups of neurons that are either close to each other spatially or temporally connected, where they're acting at the same time or close enough. These are going to be postsynaptic potentials, so it's going to be responses to something. fMRI is indirect. It is a kind of metabolic imaging. It is actually using blood oxygen levels to look at an indirect measure of activity. So as parts of the brain are more active, similar to you using your muscles, you start breathing heavier, there's going to be an increased demand for oxygen in certain regions of the brain. Of course, you also have to consider time scale, but the basic principle is that activity needs energy, energy needs oxygen, and you can measure oxygen. fMRI, as a result, is slower than EEG, but its resolution is slightly better. All right, so for some stuff that is probably going to be hopefully helpful, first thing I want to talk about are ERPs, or event-related potentials. So when we talk about potentials, this is the electrical activity. So generally measured in microvolts. And with ERPs, these are kind of time-locked electrical activity in response to certain events or stimuli. So they can be either positive or negative, positive P, negative N. A very well-known ERP is P300. So it is a positive potential that happens 300 milliseconds after the presentation of a stimulus, specifically a novel stimulus. When we look at different kinds of conditions or disorders such as depression, it can change the amplitude or latency of the P300. On the right there, you can see 3 examples of the P300 spike. So you can have single stimulus presentation. So person has to respond to a target, and you can see there you have the presentation of the stimulus, and then that big P300 spike. You can have oddball stimulus discrimination, where the S stands for sham and the T stands for target. And people have to pay attention and only respond to the target stimulus and not sham. So it could be something like a series of pictures, and you're supposed to maybe hit a button, or maybe blink, depending on what you're doing. If you see a face, but if you see a flower, don't do anything. So you can see the target one is a lot bigger than the stimulus that are supposed to be ignored. You can also have three stimuli presented as the three stimulus task, where you have sham, or you can have your sham stimuli. You have your target, and then you also have a distractor stimulus. And you can see how that affects the presentation of the P300 spike. Oh, excuse me. All right. We also have SSVEPs, or steady state visually evoked potentials. These are natural electrical responses in the brain to visual stimuli between 3.5 hertz to 75 hertz. So you can see the pathway of this on the left here. So participant wearing an EEG cap here, the electrodes, is looking at 4 different lights. Each light is blinking at a different speed or frequency. Then when this signal is being processed, you can see the spikes of what the light was, what speed the light was blinking at when the person was looking at it. And that then can produce a command, because the person, say you want something to go to the left, so you look at the left light, which is blinking at a certain frequency, and then that frequency comes up in the EEG signal processing, and maybe it's a camera or a robot is commanded to turn to the left. Could be a wheelchair, there's a variety. SSVPs and ERPs are not mutually exclusive in brain-computer interfaces. There's many hybrid models that use a combination of the two to get the best and cleanest response. We have a video here. Sorry, this is going to be a little flashy for people. You'll see these 3 boxes will be flashing at different speeds. And up here is a camera that is being controlled by the participant looking at one of the boxes. Second. Yeah. So you can, it's a little hard to tell, but they're flashing at different frequencies. And you can see the camera that's on the projector up there turning to the left, as indicated by the dot underneath of the square lighting up, and then the camera responding and turning in that direction. All right. So of course, medical applications for these are going to be probably the most obvious, and they are important, of course, but there are many commercial and industrial applications for entertainment, art, and smart devices of many kinds. You can see this gentleman here is he's wearing this is open, I believe open BCI, open EEG. And he is going to control this little kind of spider robot using his brain power. So we can watch this video and you can see how that works. Okay, let me just see. Okay. Da, 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 da. I'll just need to switch it to this screen. All right. So you can see in that video, I'll go back to our presentation here. There we go. You can see he is he's using an EEG device and controlling the movement of the little robot, also using combination of vocal commands. On the computer screen you can actually see the real-time EEG traces. Just it's a little blurry here, but you can see them here. And you'll probably see something similar if you're using EEG as well. Okay. All right. That was a lot. I hope I covered everything for you guys. Now it's open to questions. So, of course, many thanks to natHACKS for inviting me again this year. You can either contact them or you can contact me at my email if you have other questions or need to go right now. But I will, I guess, open it up to questions.
Hello, thank you for the awesome presentation. I have a microphone here. I guess, did you have any questions? No, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you. And,
all right, great.
Yeah, no,
I've done a good job then.
And
all right.
I guess I'll pause and ask, we do have a couple live stream viewers. Do any of, I can forward questions if you ask them in the chat. Maybe I'll give plus minus 30 seconds for that. Thank you. Awesome. So I suppose on that note, if any questions do come up, if anyone's watching this video, recap later on. Email's on screen. How would you pronounce that email, Pauline?
I just say pbelogan. So pbelogan@NeurAlbertaTech. Generally can answer within a day or two, especially now that my semester is mostly over. I worked my butt off in September, and now I've got a little bit more time, so I can run these workshops and see all of your wonderful smiling faces.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for your time with this workshop, Pauline, and I guess I'll let you get going. I'll see you or well, I'll hang around in the Zoom call, but I'll pause the live stream and the recording and see you in a little bit for the next workshop.
Sounds good. All right. I will see anyone who's sticking around in the next one at 7 o'clock. All right, Ben.